Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. I'm going to wrap up this week, as we usually do on Saturday, with an album review. We're going to check out an entire album, track by track, exploring each song in isolation and how it works within the larger work of art. Today, as you've probably seen, is a pretty important day. We're finally checking out Refused, The Shape of Punk to Come. We have listened to a couple of songs on here, track 6's New Noise and tracks 11 Tannhäuser. We've had reactions to before. Might have even had one of the other ones during a live stream, but not entirely sure about that. Regardless, I know exactly what I'm getting in store for here. And I think it's going to be a lot. With that said, let's dive in. We're going to kick it off with the first track. Oh, this is also the longest track. Jeez. Oh, no, it's not. We have an 8-minute later. Oh, Tannhäuser. Of course, we've checked that before. Worms of the Senses / Faculties of the Skull. Let's dive in.
They told me that the classics never got a style, but they do. They do. Somehow, baby, I never thought that we do too.
Interesting words to put at the beginning of the last album they would make before breaking up a few months later. Although I did read that they did a reunion a few years back and put out a couple more records. I thought they were done. I thought this was the last thing they ever made. So that was news to me. Tons of energy already, fairly straightforward in each individual idea, but there's so much variety across all these ideas that it's tough to call it simple in any way. Yeah, this is like channel surfing. Yeah, really funky rhythm there for 4/4. Oh, back to the noisy channel surfing. harmonies here are rough. That's fun. They alternate sides. Got some snare rumble over here.
Allora, benvenuti a Radio Super Energia. Adesso ragazzi e ragazze, presentiamo la presente sensazione, la nuova banda svedese di House, Refuse, con la fortissima canzone Refuse Party Program, Hardcore Techno Mega Mix.
Oh man. What a ride. How do you even go about describing? I mean, that's my job, right? I should not be asking you how to do my job. But how do I talk about this? All right, here we go. Here we go. Let's see how this goes. Fun. This is a very fun track. I think there is a serious skill going on here. They're definitely taking their craft seriously, but they're also making sure that they're enjoying maybe even the process of making it, but definitely the performative side of it. There isn't a single part in here that doesn't sound like it would be a blast to play. None of it's really, I think, too difficult in minutia. I don't think there was a single drum pattern or fill or bass line or guitar lick or even vocal rhythm or delivery that seemed immensely difficult, that required a ton of skill. Sure enough, right? You're not just going to pick some random guy off the street in order to play some of these riffs or scream like this guy can. There is still skill to this. But I think ultimately what they're aiming for on this is fun. And these riffs sound like a blast to play. And when we mix that, where each individual section just sounds fun, with the chaotic, anything goes, let's just do whatever we want kind of feeling to the structure of the song. We did revisit something that I would probably call a chorus, but we saw multiple times where we had this channel surfing idea of just, yeah, we're going to play this riff, 3 notes. And then someone's going to do whatever they want for a bar. And then we're going to play that riff, just those 3 notes again. Then someone else is going to do whatever they want. The end of the song comes in, and we've moved from something that feels like, to me it felt more like TV channel surfing. The end feels more like radio broadcast channel surfing, including the use of a DJ here that introduces an electronic song towards the end of the track from the Refused Dance Party. And so there's just this almost this childlike innocence to the song. Is it connected in any way? Not that I could make any sense of. This is just, we wanted to do a bunch of stuff, so we did. We crammed it all into a single song, and we enjoyed doing it, so that justifies its existence. But I also think that particularly we can look at some of the ways that the vocals delivered lines, the introduction part of it, which I think is a little appropriate and interesting given the context of the album, but also the DJ part at the end, that entire idea. There's a real comical, tongue-in-cheek element to it. Maybe comical is the wrong word, though. Maybe they're not intending to make you laugh, but again, it's low stakes. It is fun in like the most dictionary based term for that word. They don't require anything to be too serious, even though they are taking their craft seriously. They don't require anything to make sense. It very much reminds me of that line from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory when Mike TV says something about the factory not making any sense, and Charlie replies, well, it's candy. It doesn't have to make sense. And that's what this first track feels like to me. It's just fun. There is not a single point in here, I think, where my body decided to stop moving. It grooves, it runs forward at a blistering pace. It makes sure you're always keeping up with it. It doesn't ever feel like it's too important for you. It's right there with you. And by the end of the song, you can't help but have a smile on your face because you know that they have a smile on their face putting this together. It really sounds like a bunch of buddies got some instruments and made some music that they liked to play and put it on an album, whether they cared if people liked it or not, which I find also kind of interesting too, as history goes for this album, that it wasn't well known or well received. I don't know which of the two in its day, but it grew in popularity way after the band split up, and it became a very well loved album after the fact. Sometimes you just need that childlike energy in your music. And so, I mean, I still want to do analysis on this, of course. That's why you come here. It's like the whole point of this channel. But at the same time, it kind of feels pointless because, honestly, on paper, this is not something I would enjoy. It definitely has a very early post-hardcore sound to it. Kind of reminds me of Cap and Jazz in some ways. I can hear a lot of artists I like being influenced by this some way, whether directly or indirectly. There is a lot of energy in here, and I do like high energy music. But it's also very chaotic, very disjointed. The vocals are rather static. I would love to have some cleans in here. There's some stuff I'm not typically a big fan of, but it's not the point. This is, as far as I can see, the point of innovation that other bands would eventually innovate on top of. to refine down into something more palatable. And so, while I don't think I'm necessarily going to love this album, I think there will be highlights for me, but it's not something I will return to. It is something that I'm absolutely going to appreciate because of what it allowed to come from it. I think it's a rather lengthy first section that has nothing to do with the music. Honestly, let's dive into what's actually going on here. Guitar work, very simple. This is actually quite interesting. I wasn't expecting this, even though we saw some of this on New Noise, and Tannhäuser was years ago. I don't honestly remember what that sounded like. And New Noise, more or less, I have vague, broad strokes understanding of what it is. But again, it's been a while since we listened to that too, so maybe when we get to them, a light bulb will click, but right now, don't really remember them too much. Very rhythmic and syncopated, though, with phrasings that are shorter than the bar length. Oftentimes we'll have 2.5 or 3 bar phrases in a 16 beat full idea. And so this little riff is going to get played over and over, but where it starts on beat 1 the first time around, it might start on beat 4 the second time around, and then it's going to start on beat 2 of the second bar, and so it kind of shifts against the backbeat, which the drummer is keeping time with the 4/4, keeping a very symmetrical groove. And so it creates these jarring rhythms that are, well, when we pair it with the use of only 2 to 3 notes, usually it ends up feeling very djenty. Now, I don't know when djent came out. It wasn't in the 90s, that's for sure. Early 2000s, maybe. I'm trying to think of like first Tesseract and Periphery albums. Early to mid 2000s, I would say. Somewhere like 2002, 2005, somewhere in there makes sense to me. This definitely predates it, though. And so many of the rhythms in here feel very djenty because of the rhythmic syncopation, because of the focus on texture over melody, because the notes don't really seem like they matter too much. They pick a note and then they pick a third above that and maybe a fifth above that, and that's what they work with. That's it. And it's just bouncing between these notes. Now, unlike some djent that and especially modern metalcore, now that this rhythmic style is approaching more of a mainstream sound, we tend to have a really low note and a really high note. We're usually working with octaves difference between them to really sell that. But here it's all about this lower end energy. And so it's sort of just this muffled, really close note work. But that's what the guitar does in a lot of this. The other little part that we hear is noise. I don't know any other way to describe it. It's usually higher pitches and not consonant harmony. Definitely looking at dissonant harmony. Sometimes no harmony at all. Just kind of playing random sounds. Just creating something that's very chirpy and screechy and noisy. Kind of fills a similar role to, well, what post-hardcore would do eventually in metalcore also, is those pinch half-step harmonics. To get that really dissonant squeal warbliness on top of like really low chugging, that kind of stuff, right? So it kind of fills a similar role to that, just really noisy tones, but instead of coming in something rhythmically, it's just a background, a droning of dissonance, which I guess probably puts it closer to noise rock than anything else. But yeah, that's what the guitars do, and like 99% of situations here. There are a couple of what I might call riffs. Like I mentioned during the TV channel changing section, there's like 3 notes. That's like the riff to let you know we're changing channels, we're changing ideas. You know, the next bar is going to have a different instrument or a different concept in it. And I like that. It's a nice little a bell, right? Like a Pavlov's bell. After a few times when that comes in, I'm like, oh, we're changing ideas. It signifies this new concept coming in. But as far as a unique riff that I think would be memorable, something that I could, sing to somebody next week, something that might get stuck in my head, no, this song doesn't really have any of that. Everything in here is designed for maximum texture writing, which I suppose works well with its punkier hardcore roots, which are very typically focused on aggression and texture and atmosphere, usually through chords, but still more so than, memorable riffs, which is really more of a metallic thing. So that's what the guitars do. The drums are really straightforward. There's a couple of interesting flourishes in here, but for the most part, very utilitarian. They lay down a backbeat and they stick with it. They're there to drive the song and provide an aggression to it. The bass typically follows the guitar on a lot of lines, and the vocals are just that one type of scream. There's seems to be a little bit of a pitch. He has like a higher one and then a very higher one. And then we do have the spoken word at the beginning and during the build-up, but other than that, you get what you get. The vocalist is not providing a lot of dexterity in its harsh vocals. There's no contrast with cleans or anything like that. So this kind of brings me to my next point, though. It is rather similar throughout. Each of these instruments have a role. They have a type of writing that they lean into, kind of get pigeonholed into, and run with that for, well, if we cut off the ending techno bit, like 6 minutes, right? We'll call it 6. There are 10, 15 ideas in the 6-minute run. It's a bonkers amount of riffs and drum patterns and rhythmic ideas. Can't really call them melodies, but I'm just melodies for the vocals. And somehow they all feel unique-ish. They're all cut from the same cloth, obviously. They all have the same foundation, the same compositional techniques to them, but they're all wildly different. Different enough to keep my interest throughout, I should say, at least. There wasn't any point where I was like, oh, okay, this is it's the same thing we just got done listening to. No, it was like, okay, what are they ever on the corner? Oh, that's neat. It's a, kind of the same idea, but they got something new going. And the thing is, too, is if you ever felt bored, they're going to have something new in 30 seconds. So you don't have to wait long. But also, they don't really change things up either. So as much variation as they put in, if you don't like the first minute, you're not going to like the 7th. Well, the 7th was different. You're not going to like that 6th minute. They're very uniform in their approach, at least on this track. But I do find it impressive the amount of ways they can interpret this basic foundation and blueprint to writing a section of a song and keep things semi-fresh for the entirety of that run. Alright, I'm going to find some lyrics for this, then we're going to push forward with Liberation Frequency. Alright, lyrically, this song is kind of heavy for how fun the track is. It is about how the lower class is exploited and punished by those in power, particularly within the conception of capitalism. Verse 1 is a very strong thesis statement. It says, I've got a bone to pick with capitalism and a few to break. You grab us by the throat and shake the life away. Well, human life is not commodity, figure, statistics, or make-believe. Very straightforward, coming out the gate strong, telling you exactly what this song is going to be about. Capitalism tends to look at people as numbers, whether you are a walking wallet for money to be extracted from, or maybe you work in a lower class job and the corporate side sees you as a number. You're just a number of hours that worked. You're just a cost of business. You're not a person. You're something to be financed. And so the choruses tend to play into sort of sarcasm. He says, yeah, I like eating excrement. I like not getting paid for it. I like to play guilty and play with my anxiety. Yeah, this is all stuff that I love to do. Chorus 2 says, yeah, I love working and actually doing nothing. I love the way that you blame the poor, the uneducated, and the sick. This is all great stuff. Really tongue-in-cheek, very much dripping with sarcasm. Basically saying all the ways that life is right now sucks. But there's just no change to it. We don't have the power to do that. Verse 2 is interesting because it brings in something that I talked about in the music, which is an element of fun. They use the word joy, which is really great. I wish I had thought of that when I was talking about it. It says, we're all seduced by the opportunity and then robbed of hope. It says, alienation is not a commodity. You'll marginalize away the joy and sell us boredom. Yeah. This is a very fun song. It is experimental, it's full of joy, it is very human, it's dirty, it's gritty, it's complicated. It's not really smooth and flowy like I tend to like my music being. But all that comes together thematically with what they're saying. The outro says, I took the first bus out of Coca-Cola City. Made me feel nauseous. I took the first bus out of Shell City because they didn't want me hanging around. And I didn't know what this was referring to. But luckily, there was a genius annotation. There are two specific incidents. One was about a paramilitary organization that was hired by Coca-Cola in Colombia. And they murdered a union leader. And the other one was Shell, the gas company, and dealings in Nigeria. And there was a hanging there of a nonviolent environmentalist protester. And that's what they're alluding to there. So kind of talking about how these large companies can remove any opposition in whatever way that they need to, in order to control the world around them. And so we kind of take this idea, I took the first bus out of this place, I took the first bus out of that place, and we just kind of end the song with a repetition of let's take the first bus out of here. Just kind of referring to the whole globe, but I think also the concept of capitalism at large. So, yeah, it's a very angry song that's dripping with sarcasm. It is musically fun. And they're kind of packaging all of this together, that the joy is being ripped out of our lives in order to make people at the top a lot of money. I think the music captures that vibe kind of the angst of it, but also wanting to bring joy and not diluting the sound in any way. Alright, on to track 2. I kind of get the feeling that this is going to be a lyrically heavy album, if this is how they're going to start it off. Let's dive into Liberation Frequency. Technical difficulties. Well, that's interesting. It was 7 at the beginning, but they've added an extra beat here to fill out an 8. Interesting follow-up to such a high energy opener. Okay, there we go. Really high contrast on this one. Oh, I just remembered the end of track
We got more
one.
coming right now. There's more coming. We're gonna get a little sort of a session going here. A bit of a session that will feature the rhythm section.
I forgot that track one ended on, the radio cycling. And, this song was about getting the airwaves back, about, having control over what's sent out to the population. Or at least that's what I get out of that one line I picked up, and the general vibe of track one, kind of piecing things together here. But musically, I like this. What I said about the first track was that it was kind of lacking in contrast. High energy all the time. We had some fun, wild changes to things, but as far as energy levels, it's pretty consistent throughout. And so for this one, we start out really light. In fact, I think there's a full 8 to 10 decibel difference between the verse and the chorus. And the verse sticks around for quite some time, at least that first one. So much so that I kind of figured it was going to be the song and was kind of blown away when it changed to the chorus. So we do have a very distinct high and low energy portion to this track. The high energy takes what we heard on the first track with the guitars, drums, vocals. We have screaming. We have very standard bass lines. The drums, pretty straightforward. We do have a little bit of rhythmic adjustment in there, especially on the final chorus when we shifted between 7 and 8 beats with 7, or bars with 7 beats and bars with 8 beats. Kind of looking at a 15/4 idea there. So the drums get a little bit interesting there, but I think primarily that just comes from a rigidity to the drumming where they have a snare accent on 2 and 4, even if 4 ends up being a 1, because we shift from 7 to 1 instead of 7 to 8. And they just kind of accent a different part of the guitar phrase for a little bit before lining back up later on. So again, pretty straightforward drumming right there. The guitars, texture bass. There's like 3 notes. We move between them. Not a lot of complexity to that either, but it all comes together into something that's driving, high energy, loud, noisy, aggressive, and of course the vocals are on top of all this screaming. We've kind of lost some of that rhythmic edge from Worms of the Senses, but in its place we have something that's just very driving and aggressive without anything to distract from that. It makes everything very simple and clear, poignant. The other half of this equation, though, is the verse. It's the wild part to this song. It's what stands out the most to me. We have bass driven. The bass plays a few notes in a row, just kind of keeps that going. Sort of like the guitar part in the chorus. It's about picking a few notes and just building something off of that. Not really rhythmic. You just got to keep that energy going with a static rhythm. No syncopation to it or anything like that. The drums have shifted to something a bit lighter. It's closed hi-hat work. It's rim of the snare. Just anything that's going to make a light sound opposed to a big banging sound that you would get from hitting the snare or the toms on the drum head, where you would normally hit them, for those who don't know the names of the parts of the drum. And so we have these light sort of tappy, clacky things going on in the background that create a lot of energy moving forward. Again, it's more of a simple rhythm, but it has the right energy for the section. And then we have a little guitar line, clean electric, maybe palm muted, possibly. Again, sort of going in the same direction as the drums. They want really light, short notes. Not a lot of energy, not a lot of weight, not a lot of reverb or tail on these things. It's about creating a very small space, not taking up any more than you have to. The bass is the only thing that really gets any space in this section. And on top of all this, we put some vocals. They're clean. They are heavily compressed and distorted. There's a lot of tape. What is it called? That tape static on top of it too. It feels like it's being played across a radio broadcast into a low quality radio. And this whole section's point is to take up as little space as possible. As I mentioned, its volume is even quite a bit lower than the chorus, so it allows the chorus to be an explosion of angst and energy. And honestly, that's the entire track right there. I don't know that there's anything else to dive into that. I'm pretty sure this is going to make a lot of sense why they chose to do this, but I want to hit the lyrics first before we tie things together. So let me check those out. There aren't a lot of lyrics on this. There's a lot of room for lyrics, and the vocals, they say a lot of things, but it's a lot of repetition. The chorus just says, we want the airwaves back. We don't want airtime. We want all the time. All of the time. It's not just about sharing anymore. It's about having it all. And the verse asks a question about what is being played on the airwaves. It says it's coming through the air for all of us to hear. Could it be the sounds of liberation or just the image of detention? The second verse says, control my flower, business, news all ready to devour. Who's in charge and what does he say? Is he playing the alternative or does it sound the same old way? There's one extra line in here. I don't know where it comes. I guess this is part of the chorus then. Maybe a post-chorus. It says, what frequency will liberation be? And so this whole idea is that we don't really have local radio stations anymore. We don't even really have local news stations, although this is probably aimed more at the audio radio idea in its whole, partially because we're looking at, the sound of liberation more so than the image of liberation. But the idea here is that, at least in the US, almost any radio station or television station that you turn on is owned by a large conglomerate, which means that as far as media is concerned, all the information presented to you is owned by the upper class. And so we don't have anybody to sell an idea of liberation. They only sell ideas of obedience and what's that word? Complacency. Like it says, the person who's in charge, and what are they saying on these radio waves? Are they playing the alternative? Are they pushing against the status quo? Or does it sound the same old way? Is it the same thing that you've always been hearing? Is it safe? Is it conservative? Is it comfortable? Or does it challenge you? And of course the answer to this is mostly it's the same old way. I mean, yeah, it's not relevant entirely, so I'm not going to talk about it, but that's the whole song. Lots of repetition. There's like, 10, 15 stanzas here. It's just some combination of those three that we went over. The end is interesting, though. It says, we've got more coming right now. We're going to get a sort of session going on here, a session that will feature the rhythm section. Now, this comes from a show by Bob Garrity for a song, A Night in Tunisia, played by Charlie Parker with strings at Carnegie Hall, New York, November 1952. Now, there's actually multiple allusions to jazz here. In fact, the name of the album is an allusion to The Shape of Jazz to Come, which was... I'm going to have to look that up, I think. Oh, Ornette Coleman. There we go. Yeah, I would not have remembered that name. I would have been a little upset if it was somebody I should have known, and I probably should know about Ornette Coleman. But I have not heard The Shape of Jazz to Come, and now I kind of want to. Anyways, though, so we have two jazzy references here. I think that's kind of interesting, and I wonder who in Refused, or maybe all of them, I guess, were influenced and grew up around jazz. I can kind of hear some of avant-garde jazz in their music, particularly because it's experimental in a lot of ways, and avant-garde jazz is experimental, but I guess you could hear avant-garde influences from pretty much any genre here. The whole point of avant-garde is just to push against things. You can do that with any group of instruments. But being that they have made two jazz references within the album and a second track, I'm kind of thinking that somebody in the group listens to jazz. Particularly the more exploratory stuff. I mean, this is Charlie Parker right here, but, you know, I'm going to wager that somebody's listened to a lot of bebop, and like I said, maybe some avant-garde jazz too. Definitely the less palatable side of jazz music. But it does say, you know, we've got a little session that will feature the rhythm section, and the next track is called The Deadly Rhythm. So I thought that was kind of neat too. It kind of works in both ways. So that said, let's dive into this, The Deadly Rhythm. Why does this feel like early metalcore? Yeah, so we have a 5-based polyrhythm in there against the 4. Bringing this idea back from the intro. Oh, or not? You know, I kind of thought that jazzy drumming in the intro was a sample from the Parker song. But this band seems to have the chops for this too. Really light swing idea. Yeah, a really sharp 3 there. really dragging this idea out. Yeah, so once again, we have a bit of contrast on this one. We have a very jazzy intro, primarily drums, a little bit of bass. Like I said, given the sound of the instruments, I kind of assume this was a sample, but we see this again in the middle of the track as well, and a little bit into that opening, the penultimate section, with the bass and floor tom idea that brings us into that final riff. This jazzier, lighter sound. Part of it's definitely performance. We shift from driving drum ideas and driving guitar riffs with heavy drumming and screaming to really light cymbal-based drumming, walking bass lines, and chords. Now, granted, in the middle of this track, when we actually had the clean electric guitar here playing chords, they weren't jazzy. They're definitely sticking with more of a general rock sound. But the idea is the intensity was brought down, and they shifted the way that they played in order to achieve this. The guitarist used a much lighter picking style. The drummer used very wrist-based movements, very light rather than arm-based movements to get a lot of energy behind the attacks. The drummer, I don't know if they've always been playing finger picking, but you can definitely hear it there in the jazzier sections. Plus, like I said, they changed from more driving ideas to the walking bass line. So this felt like something outside of their wheelhouse, though. I think it's very interesting to find basically what is a punk band. I think this album is technically categorized as post-hardcore, which should be a type of post-punk, but I think from their roots, they were definitely in that hardcore scene. So taking a punk band, right, and having them play jazz in a way that kind of sells me on the idea they could if they wanted to. That right there is pretty interesting. We have this low energy versus high energy. Once again, just like Liberation Frequency, the point is to make the parts where the vocals come in really loud, really bombastic, to get that point across, to make sure that you're not going to ignore what they're going to say. Now, when we get to the heavy parts, though, this is rhythmically disjointed. It's called the deadly rhythm. I want to say that this is difficult to play, but it definitely takes a little bit more concentration as they're really playing around with odd phrasings, odd timings, and eventually polyrhythms. The chorus brings in a 5 against 4 idea that, honestly, the 4 is there. I know it's there. If I count it out, it works. It's just really hard to feel that 4 because the 5 comes at you from the guitars, it comes at you from the bass kicks, it comes at you from the snare accent on every other beat of the 5. Everything really leans into this 5, but I know the 4 is there. I counted it out. And then, of course, the end of the song gives us a 3. So there's a lot of rhythmic ideas in here that become really playful with the rhythmic timing of everything. Even that opening riff, which I think was in 4/4, was just very staggered, very syncopated. It felt like it favored the ends of beats more than the downbeat, and that makes it feel like it's constantly off kilter. It's just a wild track rhythmically, and once again, it feels like something I'd want to learn to play. It just feels like something that would be fun. I don't know how they do that. But I think I'd have a blast learning this rhythm and then just jamming out to it. Because I think once you get the rhythm down, there really isn't much complexity to it. Past that, the guitars are not really playing a lot of notes. 3-4 notes maybe tops. The chords during that jazzier section, if you wanted to learn that too, I mean, they don't sound too complex. You just play the chord and you let it hang for a little bit. Again, it's simple music, but rhythmically they're really going in an obtuse direction. And I don't know. I just think I'd really enjoy playing it. We have the highs and the lows again, the high contrast on this track, kind of bringing in some more of the disjointedness of that opening track, and presenting it into something that feels more digestible, like Liberation Frequency did, just having a standard verse-chorus idea. Yeah. Another straightforward track. I think this is interesting because punk isn't really known for its complexity. I didn't think I would have a lot to dig into on this, but I remember having many things to talk about with New Noise, and it is one of the longer tracks, and Worms of the Senses gave me a bit to talk about too, but again, one of the longer sections and at least structurally more complex than the last two tracks we looked at. But I think this is a strong reminder that at the end of the day, Refuse still is playing punk. They're still playing hardcore, their version of a bit more progressive hardcore, what would eventually be labeled as post-hardcore. But it's still, at the end of the day, punk music. It's still, I think, going to be on the simpler side of things. And I'm kind of coming around to just expecting fun, high energy, interesting tracks with lots of screaming and aggression to it. And I think that lyrically is where I'm going to get more depth out of this. Although, based off of the first two tracks, not a lot of depth to that. They're very clear, surface level. Usually at the beginning of the song, they have a pretty strong statement about what the song's going to be about. There's no room for misunderstanding or misjudgment on this. They're very clear about who they are and what they're saying, and I can appreciate that. So let me hit some lyrics on this one, and then we'll push into the next two tracks, because track 5 is only a minute. And we are 3 for 3 on anti-capitalism here. This song is about how those who came before us and created systems that benefited them have not allowed those systems to move on and push forward into the next generation. It specifically speaks about the deadly rhythm of the production line. That's the line of the chorus. The first stanza for verse 1 says, "This union that made us powerless is talking over our heads, claiming prosperity and a downward spiral plan." The second verse says, "This power that made us unionless is taking out of our hands cheapest labor at expensive costs, auctioned our lives away." This idea that people before us formed unions in order to have better options for themselves, and they talk over our heads now as if they're better than us. These people who were in unions previously are now part of the larger corporate workforce, and when we want to become unions now, they don't allow us to. The same people who benefited from these programs and connections and groups are no longer allowing them for people younger. And not only that, but they are taking out of our hands. It says that the cheapest labor at expensive costs, we auction our lives our way. The end of the song states, "Is it our duty to die for government and gods? Is it our privilege to slave for market and industry? Is it our right to follow laws that are meant to scare and oppress? Is it a gift to stay in line? And will it take away the blame?" I like that idea. That if you're complacent and just do as the law states, does that mean that you have no blood on your hands? Almost asking as if isn't the most righteous way to be part of the rebellion. And so we do end the track. It says, "We can no longer pay the price, we'll get organized, we no longer believe working for you will set us free." Now what's interesting here is I don't understand the jazzy component to the song and how it sits in line with this. But I also praised their ability to play the jazzier parts, and I don't think they did. The beginning of the song samples 52nd Street theme, which it says possibly was played by Charlie Parker, which would carry over from track 2's outro. But it seems that the jazzy section in the middle of the track is a musical quotation of a 1959 R&B song, "I'm a Man." Now it does say it's a musical quotation and not a sample. Maybe they did play it, but at the very least, they didn't write it. So they can still perform it, but I wonder if they have chops to write jazz music. I don't know. I'm kind of intrigued by all that. Like I said, though, we are 3-on-3 on anti-capitalism here. I'm pretty sure that's just what we're going to get for a majority of this album, which, I mean, punk's pretty good at being that, so let's dive into tracks 4 and 5 and see what's going on there. Just bass and drums here. So vocally, not really so much, but this feels like a proto-pop punk. Something that, like The Offspring, would eventually really solidify down into a mainstream sounds. Oh, interesting though, taking it in an atmospheric direction. Punk doesn't play with atmosphere. Not like this, anyways. Just pure snare and bass kick here. Wait, bass kick and snare. I don't know what I said. I meant bass kick and snare. Yeah, it's so bouncy. A lot of this accents the offbeat, and it gives it this levity. Even that right there, the start of that is on the and of one. Just a lot of this is real bouncy because it refuses to accent downbeats. Okay. was this, instrumental? Like an interlude? Oh, okay. So that's that. Alright. Summerholidays, track 4. Like I said, this feels like proto-pop rock. It still has, proto-pop punk. I got that triple P going on. It definitely feels closer to punk in its noisiness, its aggression, it's still a bit unrefined to be a mainstream sound. The harsh vocal on top of everything would eventually need to get replaced, but like I mentioned, I can hear a lot of the Offspring in this. And I think a lot of that comes down to the higher range that the guitars play around with. It's not really that low end focus that we've heard on the previous 3 tracks. There's that da 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 dun da da dun dun. See, it's a bit higher pitched than dun 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 bum 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 bum. Right, all these lower ideas, and so that elevates it. It creates a brightness to it that I think is pretty synonymous with pop punk right now. It's high energy too. This brings a lot of that punk energy to it, but it also plays around a lot with offbeats. As I mentioned, that entire chorus. You have beat 1, it's silent, and between beats 1 and 2 is where you get that da 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 dun da 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 dun. It comes in on the and of a beat, and so it creates a bounciness because it emphasizes a lot of the room between these downbeats, the off beats, the upbeats. It's the high point of the beat before coming back down. Instead of feeling grounded, it feels elevated because of that. It also has a catchy melody. I mean, when I when I tried to hum a lower riff that they've been playing, I made something up. I don't even think it's anything close to what they've been playing, just trying to get the right pitch that they've been playing around. But the chorus to track 4, da 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 dun da 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 dun, that's gonna be stuck in my head. It's catchy in a way that the rest of the songs haven't really been. A lot of this album has been hyper-focused on atmosphere, on emotion, on texture. How does it feel? How does it make you feel? This has memorability to it. It's the first track on the album to have that. It also kind of feels a little bit to me like ska, although ska is also just a very bright punk, also focusing on offbeat accent, syncopation, and high energy. So, it doesn't surprise me that there's a ska feeling in here too, although I don't know what ska's history is, and I might even be a bit off with pop punk calling this proto when it might have been right around the time that pop punk was starting to take off. I don't know. It does feel very early and rough to me though, which is why I'm going to stick with the proto prefix on it. And like I said though, it does still have a lot of that punk aggression though. So it's an interesting combination of sounds, I think. It's interesting to notice and be able to pick out where it might have evolved, where other bands might have taken that sound, while still clearly hearing where it came from and being in this weird middle point where it's not the punk roots, but it's also not, where that sound would eventually end up. And I think that's interesting. And this whole album kind of gives me that from all sorts of different genres. It's really this point of conversion where they were taking the punk sound and putting their own spin on it, and this is the bridge that would eventually turn into so many other punk related subgenres. I mean, even Deadly Rhythm, I had mentioned, I think it was the verse, I was like, this kind of feels like early metalcore to me. the way that we had more metallic riffage going on, and playing a riff and then leaving some space open for the vocal line to come in, which is such a metal thing to do. You play your guitar riff, then your riff, and then you sing your vocal line, then you play your guitar riff. I mean, Megadeth did this all the time in the 80s and 90s. So such a metal thing to do, but to present it inside of this hardcore atmosphere. So again, I can see where so much music came from this. Maybe not directly, but they were definitely ahead of the curve on this. And I think that's the coolest thing about listening to this, is kind of hearing some of these prototypes of sounds that I would grow into. You know, a lot of this stuff started to come around the time that I began to get into more exploratory musics, getting outside of the radio rock side of things, and exploring stuff that didn't get played on the radio, as Liberation Frequency would add. Was it? Yeah, I think it was Liberation Frequency that, the alternative stuff, what you don't hear on the controlled radio waves. So I kind of dig that. But aside from that brightness and bounciness to this song, again, it's another one that's a bit on the simple side. I don't have anything to add to it, but I do enjoy how 4 tracks in, and we've seen 4 very different sides of them, all noisy punk at its core still, but different enough for me to be able to separate them and say, this is definitely track 2, it did this thing, and this was track 3 and it did that thing. And it's not really blurring together for me, which can happen on albums that have a very homogeneous sound to them. Now, track 5, I don't know what to do with this. It's just electronic music. We have a digital drum beat going on here. It's got a very 90s sound to it. Very large bassiness. And then there's beautiful bells surrounding it. What they're playing, I think, kind of dances around beauty and tension. I guess it's all beautiful in the eye of the beholder, but some parts I think are just gorgeous lines, and then they'll play something else. I'm like, oh, that didn't really follow up too well, and there's like some weird dissonance in there, and they would dance between, I guess, more traditional melodies and less traditional melodies, which I think is their whole thing here, right? Trying to break outside of the norm using a sound that had become kind of homogenized at this point. Punk had run its time, and it's not to say that punk had nothing else to say, but that core punk sound was definitely, I said definitely, but I think was starting to become incorporated, where record labels were creating or buying up specific bands in order to produce the mainstream punk sound. And this was their opportunity to sort of break outside of that and say, look, punk's got a lot of stuff left in it. The tank's not empty yet. Y'all keep hearing the same thing, but there's innovation still. And that's what this is. And so, again, bringing that traditional punk sound, pushing it in a new direction with their specific flair. And so I guess that's maybe what the bells are doing here. Some of it's more traditionally beautiful, and others is more experimental. And it's all done with a beat that is consistently evolving. It feels like a linear beat at times even. And again, I don't know what to make of it. It's an interesting experimental song. I mean, I can't say that I've never written anything with a similar intent. Like, hey, we just got this, this drum machine or whatever. Let's make something out of it. And it's just like, you do, but it doesn't really feel like it fits in the album. And I kind of wish it had been added to their sounds, rather than being this little interlude here. So, if anyone has any insight, maybe an interview with them where they've talked about this track, let me know. Because like I said, it's an odd choice for the album. And it also feels a bit incomplete to me. Like I said, it's a fun exercise. You get a new machine, you play around with it, you do some improvisation. maybe you put a short 90-second thing together, but it's not something you typically release. It is, well, what it sounds like to me is mostly noodling around, maybe a little bit of tightening up, maybe some stuff done in post to clean it up, but it's not a journey, it's not a full idea, it's just a short little, hey, we were playing around with things and we made something that sounds kind of neat out of it. So, like I said, just not sure what it's doing here. But let's find some lyrics for track 4. Summerholiday is about trying to figure out what to do with your life as a up-and-coming punk band. Says, I'm tired of losing myself to some stupid childhood dream of what I could have been. Money proves the point. I'm stuck between summer holidays and punk routines. I only get one chance, and I can't let it be. The idea that this could either continue to just be something that I do, something that I just chill and relax and enjoy, or something that I do for money and I have to get into a routine for it. I like the idea of punk routine because that feels like an oxymoron. Punk is about doing whatever you want. Routine is about doing the same thing over and over. But I like that idea that we can stay punk forever as long as we do it right. He says, I'm certain that what motivates me is more rewarding than any piece of paper could be. Later on, saying that I'd rather be forgotten than remembered for giving in. And that gets repeated a lot. And again, I think it's very appropriate that 3 months later the band would disband, given that this song says he'd rather be forgotten than remembered for giving in. Quit before you become, what is it? Quit while you're ahead rather than wait long enough to become the villain. I think I smashed 2 idioms together, but I hope you get the gist of what I'm saying here. He says, we're all tired of dying, so sick of not trying, scared that we will fail, will accomplish nothing, not even failure. I like that idea, that we can get locked into indecision. We're so scared that we will fail, that we'll accomplish nothing. We won't even accomplish failure. Failure, that requires trying, that requires an attempt at something, but you're too afraid to start. It says here, I'd rather make a decision, even if that means the end of the band, rather than give in and sell out. Alright, yeah, that's again another pretty straightforward song. It's interesting that it's paired with one of the punkier, the poppier sounds on the album so far. Maybe that's what it's supposed to be about, though. Maybe pop punk was becoming a thing in '98, and this was them sarcastically saying, "Yeah, that won't be us. We're not going to sell out and become mainstream. If we continue as Refuse, it's going to be loud and aggressive, and us." I can get behind that. All right, moving on into New Noise. Heard this one before. Still kind of clearish in my mind. I'm sure things are going to get refreshed here. And then we'll move into the Refused Party Program. Yes, since that's only 2 minutes long. And I've already heard New Noise, so that should all work out rather well. Let's dive into that, see what's going on. Yeah, once again, I'm working with this really interesting phrasing. It's kind of got a 3-3-2 element in the guitar, but the drums are playing pretty straightforward 4. Oh, so this is what Oh no, maybe, is it what Track 5's supposed to represent? The very digital elements of it was supposed to be a prelude to what the new noise would be. Now it's interesting how much his vocals remind me of Davy's vocals from AFI during the Miss Murder days. Very constricted, very nasally, quite higher pitched. I do like that, bringing the intro guitar riff underneath this heavy groove. Interesting drum part under this. Also, the build up into just the bass, bringing the intensity back down. Sort of like a fake out there. There's what I was expecting.
In the wake of our existence, in our parades and in our dances, touch, and see and behold the wisdom of the party program. Essential in our lifetime and irresistible in our touch, with great spirits proclaiming that capitalism is indeed organized crime and we're all the victims. This next one's called Refused Party Program.
This is love! This is sound! This is me! But you cannot waste time!
A really big tone here. one idea so far. I have a gut feeling this is going to go into the next song. Well, maybe it does, but as we saw with New Noise to Refused Party Program, there's still a hard break between tracks, even if the transition, I think, is intended to be smooth. I'm kind of curious about that. I had a feeling about an earlier track, I think it was 2 to 3, maybe even 5 to 6, where I kind of got the feeling like, oh, this is supposed to be connected, but there's a hard break, so maybe not. But listening to those two, I think that's the first time that I've allowed a song, 2 tracks to just play into each other. And so I can really hear there is a connection there that's just cut. I wonder what happened in the production that led to that. Because I'm kind of thinking a lot of this album's supposed to just flow together with no breaks. Anyways, New Noise. If you want, check out my previous reaction to that. I pointed to the wrong side. Link should be up there. Go into this quite a bit more than I'm going to right now, particularly because while it was an interesting take on things when I first heard it, it also really falls in line now in context. It doesn't stand out as much because this is really what Refused does. As a first introduction to them, I'm like, wow, this is pretty mind-blowing. But everything that I touched on in that original video, I'm pretty sure I've said about all of the tracks previously on this album. We have high and low intensity. This time, though, instead of lighter Poppier sounds or lighter Jazzier sounds, or just lighter rock sounds like on Liberation Frequency, we now have this electro pop influenced rock band stuff. I don't know how to describe it. Y'all heard it. Definitely low energy and creating still what I think is kind of a like an allusion towards techno music, but made with a rock band. And using this as the jumping off board for the verse. And if I remember right, the music video had to do with like robots or something like that, and very refined versions of themselves that might have been sanded down, less rough versions that would have been formed that way through a record label, and then they were themselves, and like they had these two groups kind of combating. I vaguely remember it. I could be missing some of the details, but I think the general point of it was sort of expressing that, we're Refused, we're going to do what we want, we're not going to follow what everyone else is doing, we're bringing the new noise. But I think the other side of that was the double entendre there, that the new music coming in was also just noise. It wasn't saying anything either. But it wasn't noise for artistic expression, it was noise to fill silence. So having this like electronic esque element here, I think, was supposed to represent that more refined side of music and where music was going in the late 90s. And it was contrasted heavily with the punk sound in the chorus. I do think still that it's wild how, again, ahead of the time they were with this. So this one in a completely different area. This song, between the use of electronic in here, though, again, I feel it's a bit more satirical here, but also the rhythmic grooves that we have in this track that feel a bit more like modern metalcore. It really did predict where metal, well, hardcore would eventually branch and fuse with metal, and then that would eventually get sanded down and created more palatable with later melodic metalcore, and how that would get shifted into modern metalcore or maybe even alternative metal, where it still kind of has that core feeling, the focus on atmosphere over memorable riffs, but focusing on texture and rhythm. And groove and stuff like that, and merging it with electronic sounds and occasionally even harsh vocals, which I still kind of, it blows my mind how harsh vocals are coming into the mainstream here. Just a little bit. I don't think we've heard any like pure screaming people kind of take the forefront, but I mean, Sleep Token's a really big band and they use harsh vocals at times, and I think that's really impressive. We're starting to see harsh vocals in hip hop. Big hip hop names too, not some underground movement or anything like that. So it's just wildly impressive how much I listen to this song and I'm like, they were just 2 decades ahead of it. Now, granted, again, I still think a lot of this is tongue in cheek, but they had their ear to the ground. They saw where things were going, and they just absolutely nailed the sound. And had a vast understanding of where things were going to evolve into in the realm of punk and punk adjacent genres. I do like the expanded vocalization in here, and I kind of wish we heard more of that on the album. Now, granted, the second vocalist is sort of just talking at times, just kind of even maybe it's a little sing-songy, but I wouldn't really say that they're singing. But it does add a little bit extra to this song that we don't find anywhere else, is the back and forth, the call and response in the bridge, and a little bit of it in that first chorus. I'd like to hear more of that from them, but I mean, it's pretty obvious that's not who they are. It's not the music they want to make, and they've made it pretty clear that if they don't want to make the music, they're not going to. I wouldn't say that that's a defining reason why I haven't given much criticism for the album yet, but I think I made it pretty clear at the beginning with the first track that there's a lot of stuff in here that just typically isn't my cup of tea. It's an album that I'm going to... Well, actually, we're halfway through the album now. I think I can come to this conclusion. I'm glad I'm getting to listen to this finally, but it's not as... It doesn't click with me as much as New Noise did. And it definitely feels like it leans a little bit more towards the punk roots that I'm not a big fan of than the post-hardcore sections that it was kind of pioneering at the time, but didn't quite lean as much into, where other bands really took that sound and ran with it. It's a bridge album. It takes us from a sound I wasn't too keen on to a sound that I'm really keen on, and it has the pros and cons of both of them. And so I don't know that it's an album I would come back to. Couple of tracks, sure, there's some highlights in each song, I'd say, but there's a couple of tracks that I would want to listen to again. I think New Noise is one of them, but on the whole, I'm not really hearing a lot that I would want to come back to. So I do have criticisms, I suppose, in a sense. I mean, a lot of it comes down to the noisiness of it, the jaggedness of the structure. Even this song, New Noise, very jagged. But then we get something like Refused Party Program, and it's just straightforward, one idea, basically just one riff. The bass never changes. What does change is that the guitars don't play in some places. We kind of reduce the layers and then add those layers back, and that is our contrast. That's what divides up the song into the smaller parts. But it's just one idea, that's one rhythm, that's one riff, it's one chord. It's just noisy and aggressive. It is punk, 100%. And it's pretty much everything that I don't like about punk, a lot of the stereotypes of it wrapped up in a box and delivered to my ears, and I'm just not a big fan of it. I think it works well in the context of everything to have something a bit more straightforward here where the rest of the songs explore things a little bit. So on the whole, it's good contrast, but again, it's still not a song I really like. Yeah, let me hit some lyrics then. Alright, I was a little off in what I remembered about this track. The new noise wasn't a double entendre, it was actually the new beat versus the new noise. Where they are the new noise, they're the loud, aggressive stuff, and the new beat lacks character and color and bland. And that's what the verse versus the chorus is supposed to showcase. And the song goes through a lot of elements about how they're not going to be part of the new beat. They're going to do everything the different way. As the chorus says, we dance to all the wrong songs, we enjoy all the wrong moves, and we're not leading the way. They're doing things their way. If you want to go with them, that's fine, but they're not trying to lead the path to a new direction, which I still think is hilarious, given that so much of what this album did led and paved the way for what post-hardcore would eventually do. But it's also highly critical of those who are part of the new beat, and it talks about how, as usual with this album, capitalism and money ruin artistic integrity, and how they're not going to allow any of that to do. They're not going to allow themselves to fall into that trapping, I should say. As the end of verse 1 says, great words won't cover ugly actions, and good frames won't save bad paintings. No matter how much money you throw it at what they consider to be bad art, it will never be good art. It will always be garbage that's just been cleaned up very well. And I'm pretty sure that in the last reaction, I gave a little bit of my counterpoint to this. But I'm not going to go into that this time since I've pretty much already said my piece. They were definitely aggressively against new sounds, but I don't think all music that comes out of even the corporate engine is bad. And just because you're playing along with something that's a more modern sound doesn't mean that you're making bad art. I'll just leave it at that. Alright. Oh wait, we have the Refused Party program. How did I forget about that? Let me check out lyrics for that one too. This one's pretty straightforward. I probably could have just done this one on the fly without pausing. The verse says, this is the pulse, this is the sound, this is the beat of a new generation. This is the movement, the rhythm, the noise of revolution, the Refused Party program. So carrying on with their idea of the new noise being counterculture to what was rising in popularity, this just says that you can join our party program. We are going to be the revolution of sound. We are going to be the beat of a new generation. We're the good stuff. You can trust us. Yeah, a little sarcastic on that, but that's generally the point of that track. Which I guess makes sense with like the super abundance of noise on it and just the generally... Well, the funny thing is too is I think that's their least forward placed song. It's the one that feels the most conservative and traditional in its punk sound. I think that's the interesting one that says that we're the new sound, we're the new beats. Come join us when... whatever. Protest Song 68. And see, that actually was a full transition, so that really makes me wonder about the other tracks that feel like they should go together.
You must first open your mouth. You must have paired lungs and a little knowledge of music. It's not necessary to have an accordion or a guitar.
I can feel
Such a thing, instead I want to sing.
that bass
But this is
kick.
the song I'm singing.
Let's
this is just chords. This is more atmospheric than anything that they've done prior to this. I mean, it does kind of line up a little bit with New Noise, but ooh, that beat of pure silence. That was clever.
Our jaws would hurt from dropping so hard, fast, and unexpected, baby. It'd be the perfect metaphor. It'd be the perfect song we'd be singing.
Dude, the drums on this side, they're so powerful. I think this is the most interesting that the drums have been, even though it's one idea that's, yeah, but it's the most melodic, I think, that we've heard the drum work.
Could be dangerous. Art as a real threat.
This solo. I really hope this goes into the next track, otherwise this is a really odd outro. It does have a variation of that melodic drumming from earlier in the track though, so that's interesting. What? Oh, no me gusta. Yeah, I was expecting a really big sound given the compression on the drums and the massive bass boost on the bass guitar. part of what makes songs like protest songs so interesting too is that we do have chord progression in there some way, whereas this, every bar or every 2 bars, it's just the same chord. Oh. Something about the way that vocal is produced over here, it's not bad. I just didn't like it. It's like a weird texture. Yeah, this song though, you really have to like the lick. It's interesting that the songs are becoming more expressive while compositionally becoming more restricted across the album. I think I like the earlier tracks a lot better. Back to this riff. Interesting shift in the vocal direction here too. A little bit of an emo flair in the chord progression, but also with the vocals being whinier with a bit of compression on them. You know, listening to that, I don't know if this is gonna, yeah, I'm gonna pause because it sounds like it's ramping up. Listening to that drum beat, I think it's interesting pairing it back to some of the other drum beats that we've heard on here. I think some more of the, not the melodic ones, like we saw on the Summerholidays, I think had one. Protest Song had one too. Not necessarily the melodic side, but the more expressive side, where it's still a pretty contained drum pattern. It's just not your typical, snare on 2 and 4, bass kick syncopated around that, and quarter notes on the hi-hat or something like that. You know, a very typical rock idea. But the more that I think about the more expressive patterns, and in the context of that electronic pattern there, I kind of think that there's a little bit of a hip-hop influence in the drum work. Maybe even a little bit of jazziness in there too, although I think that's more about how phrasing appears more so than overall sound. I don't think I would ever confuse any of this for jazz drum playing. But I do think that there's some influence of how to phrase a pattern that comes from jazz, and a little bit of the groove that you can find in hip hop too. And I didn't really pick up on that till now, but I think that that's pretty accurate throughout this album, aside from some of the more generic drum patterns that we hear towards the beginning of the album, which that brings up my other thing. There's this weird dual movement transition stuff going on this album. The beginning of the album was more expressive in composition and structure, but I felt that the drum work and the guitar work was a bit more straightforward. So we had a series of interesting ideas, but those ideas themselves, or sorry, an interesting series of ideas, but the ideas themselves were a bit more on the simple side. As we get through the album, I feel the drumming has lightened up quite a bit. It has shifted from very rigid, traditional cookie cutter rock patterns into more fluid melodic ideas. I think the drum work in the past few songs, aside from Refused Party Program, which I think really aims to have that old school feel to it, have been really cool. Granted, it is a single 1 or 2 bar phrase that gets repeated over and over and over. It's not really expansive, but I do find it to be a bit more expressive, and I like what the drumming has been doing lately. But I'm finding that the songs themselves are becoming more narrowed in what they do. There's usually just 1 or 2 riffs. We stick with those, usually a verse and a chorus, maybe a small variation in a quasi-bridge. We don't really explore something new as much as we take what we've heard before and remix it. Usually some sort of sonic reinterpretation. Maybe there's a production shift, removing of layers, adding of layers. Maybe we cut out the low end or something like that. Maybe we run it through heavy compression. Or we take an idea that we've heard and modulate it. Maybe just remove a couple of beats or add a couple of beats or something like that. And then we return back to what we've heard for the outro. Or they make a new outro that has nothing to do with anything else, and that's a topic all on its own. But I just feel that as we've gone through this album, the structure has become very linear. It's very, well, it's predictable, I think is the word I want. And we've shifted from, we kicked the song off pretty much with a prog track as far as structure goes. And even Deadly Rhythm, Liberation Frequency, these were still a bit more exploratory. But after Summerholidays, the structure's all been A, B, A, B, C, B. All of them. And we've pared it down from, the first track, I was like, how do I keep track of everything that they did? And now I'm like, okay, here's the 2 riffs. I could probably sing them for you. They're easy riffs, not a lot of complexity to the order of them. And it's very straightforward. And I find that really interesting because as I think the overall writing has become simpler. Like I mentioned, the drums have become more expressive, but I think more interestingly is that they're becoming more sonically experimental. We did have a lot of noise at the beginning of the album, but we kind of lost that just for general angst from tracks 3 to 6-ish. But even with 6, New Noise, we began to introduce a little bit more of that synth work that we saw at the beginning. Of course, track 5 had the bells in there. And we're just beginning to explore different ways of taking the instrumental sound, the production even. The vocals have shifted. I mentioned at the first 3 songs, they're just screaming in like a single pitch. Not a lot of change there, but here, New Noise, Protest Song, Refused or Dead, all 3 of these songs have had different vocal styles and work on them. I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing subjectively. I don't know where I stand on this yet. There's some parts, the drum work, the vocal work, that's definitely growing on me, that I wish the whole album had been like this. But the songs themselves are definitely bouncing off of me on the whole now. And I'm finding less and less to talk about them. It's more of the sonic elements, the production of things, the guitar tones, the new instrumentation that I find are worthwhile digging into. And that's interesting because we never hit a midpoint where I think everything clicked for me, where I had the perfect, medium amounts of everything. There was still always something negative that was, had a big weight to everything, that held everything down. I was kind of hoping that somewhere there'd be a perfect song for me. Maybe the whole album wasn't my cup of tea, but one of the songs just really great. And again, I'm still not there. There's a lot of great ideas here. It's just not consistent enough for me. I'm kind of hoping one of these last 3 tracks really clicks for me. I remember being fairly positive about Tannhäuser. I might be misremembering that. I mean, we're talking multiple years ago. But Tannhäuser got me intrigued enough that I was hyped for New Noise. I remember that. When we did the New Noise reaction, I was like, yes, more Refused. So Tannhäuser felt positive for me. It's also 8 minutes, which means it might be as proggy as Worms of the Senses was. But Shape of Punk to Come and the Apollo Programming. No, the Apollo Program was a hoax. I had a ... title was too long. Those are both on the shorter side, so I bet they're going to be a bit more like Protest Song and Refused or Dead, where they're kind of straightforward. It's all really bizarre, but it all lines up. And I've kind of said the outskirts of this. I just want to get this one statement in the video very clearly, is that as much as this album's bouncing off of me, I think I've still had a lot of positive things to say about it. It is fundamental to so much of the music that I've come to enjoy, though. And I think it's really wild that a lot of their songs are anti-capitalism, mainstream music, anti-new beat, as they called it on the New Noise track. And yet they very clearly were the ones. They also said that, we're not leaders. They're very clearly the ones who paved the path and led the way for a lot of mainstream music today. And I wonder if that irony, if they recognize that or if it's lost on them. I wonder how they feel about that now. I think that's probably my biggest issue with the album is I generally agree with most of their takes, but I do find it to be a bit edgy and gatekeepery when it comes to the artistic side of things, and it feels lacking for me. Compassionate, sure, this is definitely how they were feeling, but it also feels a bit just like teenage angst, and it doesn't quite have any bite when it comes to those topics. I do think that at the beginning, when we were hyper-focused on anti-capitalism, that the songs and the lyrics tended to, maybe it's just because they resonated a bit, had more teeth to them. Whereas New Noise and Summerholidays I can kind of get, but definitely New Noise, Refused Party Program, they're just not there. The songs, I mean, New Noise has a really great ending, but the sarcastic verses, the very traditional punk sound of Refused Party Program, this mixed with the lyrics that just kind of feel to me, it's not a really strong middle point to the song. Now, Protest Song 68 and Refused or Dead, musically, they're not really picking things up for me. I'm not really thinking the lyrics are going to add much to them either, but maybe. Protest Song could easily get back to where I think that their lyrical strengths are. But Shape of Punk to Come is probably going to be about the music scene again. So, it just feels kind of shaky. I feel like they started off really strong, and it's just been throwing a lot of stuff at the wall and keeping things that don't stick. And it's been a chaotic album, and I'm glad that, it exists. But, I mean, I was a lot more optimistic at the beginning. I'm kind of... at this point, I'm kind of happy there's only 3 tracks left. And I hate saying that. I really do. The first track had such promise. And like I said, there's a lot of great moments on here, but it's just not consistent enough for me and what I like about music. And I'm sure that they don't care, which is probably the right way to go no matter who you are. But definitely, if you're Refused, I like more mainstream styles of music. I like things that are a bit cleaner and, less rough around the edges, exactly what they're pushing against. So I'm the type of person that they don't even want to court as an audience anyways. There's just a general mismatch going on there, and I think we're both aware of that. And, lyrics for these two, I guess. Alright, Protest Song is basically about trying to bring back... Well, actually, verse 1 says it pretty clearly. I breathe in and I create, rewoke the spirit of 68. They're really trying to bring back that counterculture movement and all of the protests that America saw. And I don't know if they're necessarily going for the... because they're not American, are they? I don't know. I can't seem to find out where they're from, but maybe I'll look that up in a second. But to me, it's talking about counterculture. It's about punching holes in tradition, they say. Let's listen to the songs of discontent and the chords and the movement. It's about pushing back. And I don't know if, other countries had this type of movement. And again, I don't know if this is necessarily what they're talking about, but this is what I feel from it, is, the hippies in the 60s pushing back against the government as a whole, having protests nationwide, month after month after month, especially in the wake of the Vietnamese War. And it was really about a huge shift in the way that we thought about culture and ideas and tradition and identity. There was still, I think, a really strong familial aspect to living, especially coming from the nuclear family of the 50s. And the 60s was really a moment, I think, of identity and independence. And figuring out who you were, and if that wasn't who your parents wanted you to be, well, it wasn't about fitting in. It was about expressing yourself and saying, well, okay, well, forget it. I'm going to go out and do my own thing then. And I think that's what they're really trying to evoke here. As he says, that spirit of 68. He calls it inspirations from the past, allowing us to focus to the future. Creative thought and action. We could be dangerous. Art could be a real threat. I think that's what this song's supposed to be about. And of course, the 60s had a lot of protest songs. So calling it Protest Song 68 kind of brings together a lot of what was going on in the world of music at the time, especially rock and roll. And maybe punk. 60s seem early for punk, but maybe it wasn't. Again, my history of punk is not great. So maybe punk was also part of this counterculture movement in the late 60s, early 70s. So that's what Protest Song is about. Refused or Dead is the first time that I've read some lyrics and really had to dig under metaphor. They've been very clear and precise in their language to this point, and I'm not sure what this one's about. Although I get the feeling that it's about not being able to deal with the rising fame and what that brings, both in expectation from fans, but also in what it means to take... I mean, this is exactly what came off of the track Summerholidays, right? Do we continue this as a hobby, or do we take it full time and all of the business elements that come into that? And this, I think, is a call to say, yeah, we're not going to do the business stuff, and we can't keep doing it as a hobby either. Well, life gets expensive quick. So I think we're just done here, is kind of what this feels like to me. The chorus says, a naive young secret for the new romantics. We express ourselves in a loud and fashionable way. I have no idea what this means. I mean, the expression makes perfect sense. They are loud, and at the time it was very fashionable, very counterculture to be punk. But a naive young secret for the new romantics. Maybe he's just saying that, you know, if you're wanting, if you have a romantic view on being a rock star, here's a secret for you. You know, after this, he says, faces like angels lick our fingertips. We don't have the patience to deal with it. With battered bodies and puckered lips, we don't have the patience to deal with it. And a lot of the end of this is we don't have the patience. Over and over and over, followed by the naive young secret expressing ourselves in a loud and fashionable way. It's a lot of repetition, which matches the repetition of the music. And of course, they say they play in a loud way, and they do play in a loud way. There's parallels here, but I don't know. They've never sung anything as cryptic as this. And I don't even think it's really that cryptic. I'm blind to it for whatever reason. I can't look past this one thin layer of metaphor they have here. I don't know. I've been pretty good with the lyrics so far. It surprises me that I've hit a song that I don't know what's going on. All right. Shape of Punk to come, title track. Let's see what's going on here. Oh, of course. Where I thought it was going to transition, it wasn't. Okay, a proper riff. They really love these highly compressed openings. Yeah. Wow, I thought we were already full, but no. There's a lot of compression on the drums still. Interesting turn there. Yeah, stuff like this. Protest song saw a little bit of this with the acoustic guitar bit in the middle. Random shifts to different ideas, kind of bringing back some of that energy of track 1. To do this too as a build-up, not to add more layers, but just to modify the sound. Again, really focusing on sonic composition over notation. same riff in a different timbre. Yeah. Ooh. A little bit of groove in there. Bringing back the noise. Okay, things are shaping up. Alright, I do have to bring this up. Some of these endings absolutely ruin the album pacing. I think they're okay in isolation, but with so many songs that end on something completely different that has nothing to do with anything else, and oftentimes even just devolving into noise or a drone, something long held out, like this, that ending. I thought the solo was an interesting idea, the duet between the two of them, but to have the left side just keep going and just play noisy stuff, there's no melody to it, it's just crunchy, atmospheric, hitting random notes. It doesn't add anything to the song for me. It's just frustrating to listen to because the song could be over, we could be moving into the next one, and instead there's 20 seconds here of just nothing. I mean, it's something, of course, but it's the equivalent of nothing, of just saying random words at the end of a paragraph because you wanted your chapter to be one paragraph longer than it was. And I was going to say I don't get it. Why are they doing it? Refuse does what they want to do. That's their whole MO. We're going to make whatever sound we want. We are the new noise. But it's little things like that. It's what makes it difficult for me to get into with this. There is something I haven't really talked about too much, and I should have already, is that we're moving back into some interesting ideas here in the back quarter of this album or so. I think I got put on a tangent that kind of threw me off the rails. Track 8 actually has a lot of really interesting things in it that I wanted to talk about. I wrote down some notes and I just never got around to bringing it up. Track 8 does this thing where it's a punk song for a minute or so, and then it devolves into something totally different. We have chord shaping on a clean electric, maybe an acoustic guitar. I think it was clean electric. And by chord shaping, I just mean that you play a chord, not playing all the notes at one time, but playing one and then the next and then the next. And usually what they did in a rising and falling pattern. Do 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 do. The notes ring out, they start to overlap. You can feel the chord without them just strumming chords the whole time. So you can create a little bit of a melodic or rhythmic element out of it. And still get the foundational elements of creating the chord underneath the music. This feels really out of place for them. This is not loud. This is not angsty. We've kind of seen some of this, like on New Noise, where it was done a bit more sarcastically with the quieter side of things. I still think track 5 might have been a bit sarcastic too. That was the electronic one. Still not too sure how to feel about it. We've heard this a couple of times though. Here, it seems to act as a low point of intensity, which we have seen them do multiple times, of contrast, high contrast from high intensity to low intensity points. But what I find interesting about this is it comes out of nowhere and it doesn't get to finish its idea. It's actually in the middle of the rising part of the chord shaping that the next section, which is really angsty and noisy and dissonant, comes in. And it just sort of interrupts it and butts its way in. And yeah, this was interesting. I was talking about how the structure of the music has started to simplify, and this was a fun little change of plans there, taking something that I expected and subverting my expectations and giving me a little bit of a startle in the whole process of that. It's definitely a way of, the song is about being disruptive. It's about protesting and bringing back some of that energy from the 60s today. And yeah, I think that's a really great way to go about doing that while still creating interesting musical moments too. And I don't think I gave it the credit it deserved there. It also had a really harsh transitional shift at the end of the song, which took us into a wildly different direction, again, sort of interrupting what we were doing and going in a very different direction. And this constant shifting to new sounds, it kind of reminds me of what we would see in a band like Between the Buried and Me a little bit later with their progressive metalcore. Early Between the Buried and Me, I should say. But even then, we move on to track 9, Refused or Dead, and like I kind of said in the last, it was like the last minute and a half of that track, aside from the weird outro, it turned into an emo song. Like the harmony, the vocal delivery, all of it. They are still expressive. I feel like I've been undercutting that. I do feel like generally they are just angsty and noisy all the time. A lot of the songs are, generally speaking, at a single level, but there is nuance to it that I've been glossing over. And I think part of that is because the nuance isn't my cup of tea either. How they are being nuanced is typically very disruptive in a way that pulls me out of the experience in a negative fashion. But I did want to bring that up because I do think it's something that they are presenting rather well, and it is still taking punk a step further. I find punk to be a very stereotypically two-dimensional genre. And they are definitely doing a lot of really neat things while still retaining onto that punk foundation here. And I feel like the past couple of analysis segments I may have been a bit harsh and have been not adequately speaking about some of their more interesting structural ideas. And the Shape of Punk to Come continues on with this. There are some wild mix-ups in here. There is, much to my benefit, there's more than 2 riffs going on in this track. So that's kind of neat too. There's just a lot of ideas. There's a guitar duet at the end. There's tremolo picking on this song. There's some wild drum patterns going on. A couple more that lean back towards those earlier traditional sounds, but again, still moving with those very unique drum patterns. But this song also, on the other hand, sticks around with one riff that we hear a lot. Sometimes with the bass cut out, sometimes more compression to it, sometimes only the guitar, sometimes only the bass. We hear this idea a lot. Again, there's a ton of sonic experimentation on here, which is cool. I guess it's not my cup of tea. I prefer to hear more dynamic writing rather than dynamic sounds. But once again, it's also very predictive. I don't know if punk or hardcore was doing this at the time, but it's definitely something we hear in a lot of modern mainstream heavier genres. Again, bringing up alternative metal and melodic metalcore and stuff like this is simple composition with interesting or more complex production put on top of it. So it's really hard to, from a historic point, this is amazing to get through. From a subjective one, oh, dang, some of these parts, especially, I'd say minute 1 to 3-ish of Shape of Punk to Come, the middle chunk, it's very rough for me. But, I do want to give praise where praise is due. I do think they're doing a phenomenal job here crafting refused style punk, putting their stamp on the style, and paving the way, as much as they said they want it, for what was to come. Let me read some lyrics on this, then we'll head into Tannhäuser. And I think this song is just about going to a punk show, maybe. It says, hey baby, never felt this good, freedom through a stereo, and you wish you could take a bite, do a dance, get lost on a crusade, jump on this soul train to destination unknown. The second verse says, hey baby, never felt this free. A pair of new shoes and a punk rock show to see. Give acclamation to these blue ribbon babies and check the calendar for the expiration date. I don't know what's going on with that last part. And then he says, we've all been bitten. We've all been underground. We've all been beaten, battered, and bruised. We've been told to get down. So society's been kicking us, right? Everything that we've been talking about up until this point, whether it's anti-capitalism or trying to push for more artistic art, we'll word it that way. And he says, society's beating us down, but this is where we can get down. It says, we're all dressed up. This is the chorus, by the way. And we've got nowhere to go. I told you so. We've got nowhere to go. So, we'll find some adolescent beats with a new thing to see. Smash guitars like you've seen on the TV with burning speakers and with flaming hair. We'll have a riot right here. And I think this is just about what punk is supposed to be. Right? When life's got you down, go to a punk show. Get dressed up in your best. Go have a good time. Set some stuff on fire. Start a riot. It's punk. It's a pretty straightforward track, I think. But I think it absolutely speaks to, I think, a very large group of people in the night. I mean, punk as a whole did this. It was always about sticking it to the man, about being counterculture, about, the mundanity of life getting you down. So let's go do something extreme. Let's be loud. Let's be rambunctious. And this is just another good punk anthem. So that's going to take us to Tannhäuser. Let's see if this rings a bell for me at all. This doesn't ring a bell at all, but I like the elegance of the violin originally and now getting mutated and transformed and distorted into something noisier. But I think what I like most is that there's a melody to it. It's big, it feels large, there's a lot of anticipation in it. It's going to build into something great. But I'm really digging the melody on top of all this. Even the guitar over there adding to the atmosphere. Why do I get the feeling that this very cool opening is going to have nothing to do with where we end up? Oh, okay. Interesting. I always forget how loud they can be. They do such a good job of creating contrast. So far, I do think this is their most metallic song. Very much feels like what 2000s metalcore would become.
Every street.
Oh, but not anymore?
And every road becomes a thrill, because it can be. Every turn we take,
Oh, that harmonic?
every decision that we don't make, even the decisions we don't make, will bring us into the secrets of the town. Every corner we turn will lead us. Every corner we turn will lead us down the labyrinth. And every desire that we earn will guide us alive, living, loving, and searching.
It's interesting to listen to their more riff-based writing. I feel like it differs so much from their texture-based writing. Because it's all about atmosphere. That was an interesting interlude. A slight down tuning. There's only one track left. I think hands down this is my favorite track on the album. But it's also the most unique. It's very different from the rest of their music, so I don't think it's fair to say this is my favorite when it's atypical. Okay. Not a lot of time to explore this, but sounds cool. Yeah, so we have like eighth notes on a finger picked bass guitar and a string trio. Yeah, this is actually gorgeous. I'm curious though, is it theirs? Because I've already made this mistake once, thinking that they wrote something that they probably didn't. Yeah, that works for me. And the thing is too is if you have a keen ear, you might already have this in your back pocket, right at the keyboard, ready to type it in. A lot of this song is one idea. We have the melody from the violin and the intro that eventually gets passed on to the guitars, and we hear the same riff over and over and over. The vocals on top don't really change. The drum pattern in the back isn't their most expressive. It is a little bit more of a traditional rhythm to it. Even what goes on around it, we have a little bit of atmosphere and a guitar over here. The bass is just giving us root tones at the bottom. It's pretty much all the same things I've been, in a sense, complaining about since the beginning. It's a lot of repetition of a single sound, but it clicks with me better because it's a sound that I enjoy. This feels a bit closer to post-hardcore that I would hear today, a little bit mix of metalcore and some of the heavier sections. It honestly reminds me of La Dispute in a lot of ways, with its heavy focus on atmosphere and minimalistic layering to create room and a very tense emotion for the vocals to deliver a story through. And I think that the spoken word part on this really delivers that vibe. But even the chorus, where we have the screaming and we have the more driving guitar part, it's one tempo. It's a bit on the slower side. It's a repetitive riff. There's no chord progression. It's everything that I've not been a fan of, and I think that's it's a really great moment to bring up that. Well, it's a good moment to bring up a lot of things, but I think particularly that we all have home sounds, right? That even if someone plays something melodic for you, where the timbres are all there, that there can also be an element of composition that doesn't quite click with you. And I think that's what's going on here. I don't think the song really changes much of what Refused is. It just presents it in a different light. And that light is more palatable to me. I don't want to put this song on a pedestal and say that this is excellent, because they did everything different and created something very, unique within the album. It is. It is a unique sound. It's a unique energy. And I think that's the real big thing here, is that it's not just driving angsty punk. It's chilled out a little bit. It's riff focused. It's still creating an atmosphere, but just less texture based than a lot of the other guitar work on this album. And those two things come together to create something that's just a lot better to my ear. It treats me a little better than some of the noisier ideas. This one really focuses on using harmony and melody to create a dense, palpable atmosphere, which is just better than using noise to create an atmosphere. For me, it's very subjective, right? Some people may find this to be a low point on the album because it isn't like anything else. But I do think it's interesting that at the end of the day, if you break this down into basic foundational blocks, you're going to find that this song really isn't that different from anything else. Not in the way that they go about crafting it anyways. The end result is obviously different, but how they get there? No, this is very much what Refused does. Now, the other thing that really helps it for me is new instruments. I mean, the entire outro is gorgeous. I love the string trio. I love the bass underneath, even though the bass really isn't doing much of anything. And it's even copying an idea from earlier. Just playing those eighth note pedal tones we actually heard right after the first big section in the song. So it's about like minute 2.5 or something like that. Yeah, we just took that same part 1-to-1, played it here, but instead of putting this big atmospheric metalcore thing over it, we put a string trio with counterpoint and melody and harmony, and it just sounds fantastic. And like I said, I don't know if they wrote that. As far as I'm concerned, they don't have the chops to do, well, let me rephrase that. They have not displayed the chops to do something like that. And when I thought I saw them do something outside of what I considered their wheelhouse, it was samples and them performing something someone else wrote, an excerpt from another song. So I don't want to assume that they wrote this ending. Maybe they performed it. Maybe they have the chops for that, but maybe they didn't write it. And so I really like the melodic writing in the intro and the outro, and I wish we could have seen more of that. I wish we could have seen more of this melodically driven atmosphere writing that we saw in the verse of this. It's just not who they are, which kind of makes it interesting that they're playing it at all, but also, once again, how are they so ahead of the curve on this? This is exactly where metalcore was going in the next few years. So it's it just blows my mind. Definitely rough around the edges, but again, they just had their finger on the pulse, man, on so many pulses. I think that's what blows my mind the most. And of course, contrast. We have low points in here. We have high points in here. I think the low points being also riffier based, not noisier based, really helped as well. And it's a lot of things that I tend to like in music, really focused on and put into a refused style. And so, yeah, I mean, it's wild that I enjoyed this, and then y'all threw new noise at me next, which is very different. Oh, geez. Let me read some lyrics on this, see what's going on there. And this is another punk anthem. Maybe not musically, but lyrically. I think it really stands for what Refused is stating with this whole album. It says, "Where do we go from here?" I think that's a really good choice of word to put at the very end of this album. There's still 4 minutes left, right? It's not the end, but we've wrapped up who Refused are quite a few times. They've had basically 2 different kinds of lyrics here. Capitalism sucks, and art sucks because of capitalism, but we are going to ensure that art stays good. That's really their 2 things. And so after bouncing between these for so long, we finally have this moment. It says, "Where do we go from here?" Just about anywhere. Disoriented but alive, boredom won't get me tonight. Let's bring the city to life, to light, tonight. There's no destination, but with a goal in mind, we can be realistic and demand the impossible. I like this. This is optimism in the face of boredom, in the face of staticness. It says life can only be as stationary as we let it. It's up to us to bring light to the city, to bring life to the city. And if it's up to me, well, I won't be bored tonight then, will I? And I love that. It says there's no destination in mind. We just have a goal. We don't know how we're going to get there, but as long as we put one foot in front of the other in order to keep things interesting, we'll get there. And we can demand the impossible through that. The spoken word section says every street is an adventure, every road becomes a thrill because it can be. Not because it is, but because we can turn it into that. It continues to go in this direction that we can have everything, that the desire we want will guide us alive. It will bring us life. It will bring us love. We just have to keep searching for what brings us, what makes things interesting next. And so he repeats the question and the answer at the end of the track. So where do we go from here? Just about anywhere, because boredom won't get me tonight. Yeah, absolutely lovely. Now I do find it interesting that it is in their most I don't know if it's divisive, in their most unique track on the album. a song about not being bored, and they play something that's quite unlike anything else on the album. I love that. As long as you make things interesting, you'll always have spice in your life. So let's play something unlike anything we've played before. I really love that. I don't expect this final track to follow in line with that. I'm really expecting more punk, less metal influence. But I think that's a perfect sound to put on that specific song. Let's dive into the Apollo programming. The Apollo program was a hoax, and see how they wrap this album up. Was that a chair creaking, or did they mean to put that in there? So we're continuing on with kind of these folkier ideas. Folky's the wrong word, I think. It does feel like a release, though. I think it's interesting too. I mean, maybe I have the history of Refused influencing this, but it almost feels like they're taking a moment to rest. I do like the layered melody here, though. Come on, man, this is so good. But it's not a victorious rest. It's not like the job's over and we get to relax. There's also a lack of consonant tonality in the vocals. Okay. Alright. It's an interesting finale. Particularly because it continues on with the layered melodic writing we saw at the end of Tannhäuser. It's very much not them. And yet they're doing it exceptionally well. It makes me think that maybe the end of Tannhäuser was their writing. Because they're showcasing here that they can write strong multi-melodic lines too. And I think that it sounds wonderful here. I really love what they're doing. It's a very warm atmosphere. It's comfortable. It's low energy, which is another differentiating factor here. And like I was trying to explain, I feel like the energy here, it's low. It feels like rest, right? But not, it's a well-earned rest, but not a victorious one, right? It's not that the task is done, it's just that you've done as much as you can on the task and you're passing the torch on to someone else. You know, there's still a lot of work to be done. We haven't completed this. It is not victorious, but it is time for me to, rest, for me to stop. And it's kind of bittersweet in that manner, and that there's still a lot of pride, but the time's just over. And like I said, that may be quite a bit informed by what I know of what happened with Refuse. Maybe they were seeing the writing on the wall already. We'll get into the lyrics in a second. Maybe we'll find something in there that confirms or denies this feeling, but that's what I get out of it. It's bittersweet, it's tiring, or maybe tired. A lot of this comes from the acoustic instrumentation, but also the harmony, the chord progression, the melodies on top of that. Maybe they just wanted to write something beautiful, less noisy, which kind of goes against everything the album's been saying, but also what if we did punk? Acoustic punk. That seems like something up Refused alley. I don't know. I'm very confused by it. They're just, you know what it is though? So when we look at albums, right? A first song should either introduce you to an album or be the thesis statement for what the album's going to be. I think they do a pretty good job with that. I think what we heard on that opening track is pretty indicative of what the album does overall. If you don't like the first album, or the first track, there's not a lot in here for you. If you do enjoy it, you got a lot of meat to gnaw on. Usually around the middle of the album, you want to have a bit of a low point in order to create some flow, rising and falling action. And I think they do that pretty well with Protest Song, parts of it bringing the energy down a bit. And towards the end of the track, you either want to wrap up your themes or wrap up your music. And your themes can also include story as well if you're a concept album. This kind of doesn't do any of that, and I find that really wild. We'll get into the lyrics here. Maybe they do wrap some things up there, but as far as Tannhäuser goes, I think that's a really great direction for the lyrics to go, but I don't think it wraps everything up very well. Well, no, actually it is, isn't it? Yeah, so where do we go from here? Perfect way to end that. Musically, it doesn't do any of that, though. It stands out. It's a very unique song, and it feels weird in context. Although, like I said, from a thematic perspective, it's nice that their song about where do we go from here includes new styles of music. Very cool way of lining that up. But then you have this, and I don't know what to make of it. It doesn't feel like, I mean, just like Tannhäuser, it's a really weird direction for the album to go musically. You're also ending on a very, very low note, which can work. We've listened to quite a few, especially emo albums that love to end on low notes. Low energy, low intensity, just kind of final goodbye kind of way. Actually, that might be a more appropriate phrase than I intended. But I'm really curious about the lyrics of it, because this just feels like a bizarre way to end a very punky album, is with some metalcore, some future-reaching metalcore, and an acoustic, multi-layered melody bit. I don't know. It's kind of wild, but it's very Refused. Like I said, I don't get it, and that's Refused in a nutshell. We're just going to do whatever we want, regardless of convention or tradition or what anyone else does. And so, from that perspective, I mean, hats off to them. The one thing that stands out to me, though, is all of the beautiful things lining up. Um, really gorgeous multi-layered writing, and then the vocals. I don't want to put too much focus on this because it is part of punk and, emo music in general, indie rock. It has a storied history, but the vocals being out of tune absolutely robbed this song for me. I know some people are going to hear it and make it feels more human and more alive to them, feels more relatable. That's all well and good. This is a subjective topic we're on. But the dissonance that the vocals brought absolutely ruined the song for me. It's a choice that I don't like in the track. And the vocalist has shown that they can sing in tune. They've done it plenty of times on this album. Well, I say plenty, like 2 or 3 times I think we had clean vocals. And they choose not to here. And I don't, again, there's no song on here that does something. Well, actually, Tannhäuser is pretty consistent in how much I enjoy it. But most of the time, it's compromise. I find stuff I like, it's paired with stuff I don't. And this ending is just that in a nutshell for me. Oh, man. It really detracts. I love what they're doing. I think that the counterpoint that the vocals bring against the lead guitar and what the bass is doing would sound phenomenal if it was in tune with everything. I really want to hear a version with that. But the way it is, again, it's just Refused doing what they want to do. They refuse to make music that I full-heartedly enjoy. Let me read some lyrics to this. We're going to try to wrap all this up, and then we'll wrap up the video. Yeah. I think I've slightly changed my tune on this one, at least what I think it means. Tired, I think is still the word here, but where I interpret it as a well-earned rest, it almost feels like a bit of, not defeat, but a moment to breathe. The song returns to the anti-capitalistic elements here, and it talks about how we really don't have any say in anything. No matter who we elect in for anything like a government position or anything like that, it's always going to result in the same exact thing. They're all the same, is what the song is saying. It says, so now it's time to flip coins and turn tables. He says, there's no prestige in your title. We're after your head. The destruction of everything is the beginning of something new, and your new world is on fire, and soon you'll be too. Basically saying that we're tired of the way society is now, and a bit of an anarchist viewpoint of this is that it's time to start from scratch. The outro is sabotage will set us free, throw a rock in the machine, asking everybody to be as disruptive as they can in order to start over, because the system that we are in, the vocalist does not view as fixable. We must start from scratch. But it's not delivered with the bravado and the bombast of punk. It's very quiet. Like I said, it feels tired. This person definitely wants revolt, but he can't scream about it anymore. It just has to be spoken word. Maybe he believes it feels more truthful. Maybe he just lacks the energy to continuously scream about it all the time. I don't know. It's an interesting way to end this, though, because to me it feels like defeat. a continuing on, sure, but we've been at this for so long. I don't have the energy to scream about it anymore. And that feels like change hasn't been made. So, like I said, it's an interesting way to wrap it up, especially after a song that says, "So where do we go from here? Anywhere we want." And the track right after says, "We're the same place we've always been. We're just going to have to burn it down. It's the only way to move forward." And it's a really interesting themes to have back to back on this. Do I think this is a fantastic way to wrap the album up? I don't know. Tannhäuser, I think, would be a really great one because it brings together both the "we need to keep punk alive" attitude and the "we need to, have a better tomorrow" socially than we did yesterday. I think it brings both of those together in an interesting way with a good theme and a set of lyrics while also presenting new music that helps forge this new future they're aiming for. This is a very wild way to bring that energy down in a negative way, I think, that kind of reduces the impact of the album as a whole, but also as Tannhäuser, which I think is the real true ending of this album and where they should have stopped. This is a beautiful song. I really hate to say it shouldn't have been included. It doesn't fit here. I don't think it fits anywhere in the album. Maybe somewhere in the middle, just to bring the energy down. Maybe put it after after the new noise. Might not have been a bad idea. But Tannhäuser is how this album should have ended. And I know hindsight, right? It's a lot easier for me to sit up here and 20 years after this came out to say, "Oh, I would have done this." Like I've mentioned in the past, track listing and how to form an album is probably even harder than making the music on the album. You're never going to get it right anyways. So I don't want to put too much weight on it, but it's a weird ending. I'm not super happy with it, I guess. These are my thoughts. Refused the new shape of punk to come. What is this called? The shape of punk to come. What do you think of this album? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you want to toss in your own opinion to the conversation. Tell me how I'm wrong about some stuff. Tell me how my opinion is wrong on some stuff too. Yeah, go for that. Anything you want to put down in the comments, let me know. I read them all. Still to this day, like 2,000 videos in, I still read every comment that comes in. So if you got something to say, I'll see it. Above that, you can head into the description box. You'll find a link for Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. UTC. We're going to do a live stream. 2 hours. We just hang out, listen to good music, that kind of stuff. If that interests you, if you can make it, drop by. It's a blast. If you can't, Monday I'll be back, usual time, to check out some new music. No, to check out regular reactions. You guys know what it is. Whatever. Monday stuff, right? Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.